Hi, my name is Ted Persson. I'm a partner at EQT Ventures, and we're here today to talk about product and storytelling. And with me here, I have my colleague Martin Eriksson. Do you want to say hi to the audience?
Hi, everyone. Excited to talk about product as always.
And we are two ex-product builders, storytellers, in my case, designers, turned VCs. So for the last 6 or so years, we have worked at EQT Ventures. Martin joined a bit later, and EQT Ventures is the VC arm of EQT, which is one of the largest investment companies in the world, part of the wider Wallenberg sphere. What we're doing with EQT Ventures is that we're creating the VC we would have wanted when we were on the other side of the table. We were entrepreneurs and so forth. So if there's one thing that we believe is super important as VCs, it's empathy. It's deep understanding of what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And interestingly, if you think about our product as a product, it's basically empathizing with our main stakeholder, the entrepreneur. And the same thing goes if you're building a product or a service for other types of user groups. That empathetic connection to your audience is key in our perspective. We're spread out across Europe. So we have, I think we're 30 people on the venture side. I'm based in Stockholm. We have people in Berlin, Amsterdam, London, Paris, and San Francisco. So we really believe that we're doing a lot of things right in terms of tech in Europe. And interestingly, Europe has been kind of like the forgotten continent, maybe up until last year, when the narrative was all about Silicon Valley and about China. So we believe that we're doing a lot of things right in Europe. These are just some key facts about our fund. I think the main takeout here is that we are a bunch of ex-builders, ex-founders doing venture capital, so investing primarily in Series A rounds and B rounds, but we also do some late seed and some early growth. So if you're looking for investments, you're looking for somewhere between 1 million euros and 50 million euros, we're the ones to talk to. And right now we've invested in 76, both B2B and B2C companies. So with that, over to Martin, who will talk about the 10 things founders get wrong about the product.
And as Ted said, we wanted to kind of share some of the top things that we see founders getting wrong about product. And the reason we kind of have that experience is we've just been doing it for a while ourselves, right? And made a lot of these mistakes before. So my name is Martin Eriksson. I'm sometimes better known as the big friendly giant online. I've been building product online since the mid-90s, or since there wasn't online really. I'm the co-founder of Mind the Product, which is the world's largest community for product people, and the author of a book on product leadership for O'Reilly, which came out in 2017. As Ted said, the last 3 years I've been working with our portfolio companies across Europe and helping them with all of these challenges. So let's get started. What are the 10 things that people, and especially founders, often get wrong about building product? Well, the first one is that your idea is worth nothing. We see it so often that people come up with a slide deck or an awesome idea and think that that is all you need to do in order to go build a successful company. Because ultimately your business plan is a work of fiction. And it's only once you get into execution that anything starts to matter. A great example of this is this patent for puzzles with pieces rotatable in groups that actually 5 different people came up with around the same time, ironically, within a couple of years of each other. And of course, you might recognize one of these names as Erno Rubik, who came up with the Rubik's Cube. And it was only in executing it and taking it to market and being able to market it that that exact same idea actually became the ubiquitous toy that you've probably all played with today. So execution is everything. As Thomas Edison said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. So it's all about that hard work. So think about how you can de-risk that fiction in your business plan by tackling your riskiest assumptions first and focusing on delivering value as quickly as possible. So your idea doesn't count unless you can get it into the hands of your customers. Number two is how critical it is to have a shared mission. John Doerr, who's probably one of the most famous VCs in the world, said that we need missionaries, not mercenaries. You want people who really care about solving a customer problem, who care about a mission for the company, not just there for the paycheck. The way to build that is to make sure that you're focused on a customer problem, not the solution. You want to solve something for an end user. You want to be ambitious and aspirational. Your vision and your mission should be something that maybe you don't even achieve in your own lifetime. It should be a really big, meaty goal. And you have to keep communicating it repeatedly. Every time you hire someone, every time you're talking about what you're building to founders, to VCs, to the press, you have to keep communicating that mission. You cannot repeat it often enough. The third thing is not to mistake vision for strategy. That big meaty goal, that big vision is great and it's so important, but it doesn't actually help you figure out how you're going to achieve it. The vision is where you're going. The mission is why you're going there and why you're doing this. And the strategy is how you're actually going to do that. In every presentation, you kind of want to be able to quote Sun Tzu in The Art of War. Tactics without strategy is simply the noise before defeat. And strategy has to be unique to you and your business and your unique opportunity to solve a problem. It builds on your strengths. It leverages opportunities that you have identified in the market. And it includes coherent actions that will actually take you step by step towards that ultimate vision and mission. Number four, and this follows on from that, is not to mistake KPIs for outcomes. So often we see businesses that are really focused on shipping features, hitting KPIs, but do you really want your business to be aligned around those things? Or do you want them to be aligned around delivering customer value and actual business results? Who cares how many stories you wrote, how many points you shipped, how many lines of code you've written, unless you're actually achieving results for your business and your customer. So ignore vanity metrics. Who cares about site visits? Who cares about, how many followers you have? All of those things don't matter unless they're actually delivering value, unless they're converting, unless they're engaging, unless they're retaining on your product. So ignore the vanity metrics and define proxy metrics for business value where you understand whether you're actually solving the customer problem. And think about how those can be split into leading indicators versus lagging indicators. Retention's one of the most important metrics out there. Net retention, even better, but that's a lagging indicator. If you're signing 1 year or multi-year contracts, you're not going to see whether you've had that impact until afterwards. So what's the leading indicator for your retention? Is it engagement? Is it usage? Is it actual customer value? What are the things that you can understand how to measure that let you know that people are going to renew a year before they actually do renew? Number five, and we see this so often, you are not your customer. Even if you looked exactly like your early customer and you built the product for people exactly like you, as soon as you started to build a startup to do it, you have way too much domain knowledge to truly represent your customer. And you're focused on different things, you're thinking about different things, you're motivated by different things, and you just don't look like your customer anymore. So even if you start from that place, get out of the building and talk to actual customers. Focus just as much on prospects and casual users as you do your power users. Number six, we're getting through these really quickly. Not every customer is worth it. So often, again, especially in enterprise or B2B SaaS, we see people chasing every single customer, every single big ticket, and especially those big first enterprise sales. They can be so appealing when you're a small startup and someone's holding $1 million check in front of you. But you really have to be focused in the early days. You have to focus on one segment or persona at a time. And you really, really have to avoid custom work. So often those enterprise deals come with, oh, we'll give you this $1 million check if only you build X, Y, and Z. And the only time you should say yes to that is if X, Y, and Z were already on your roadmap, and this will help fund that build and actually get it done. But if it's taking you away from that vision, if it's taking you away from your strategy, just say no. Number seven, your competition is not who you think it is. Too often, startups always come in and say, oh, we're competing against this other big business, we're competing against this other startup, when fundamentally your customer probably isn't even using that technology yet. The most famous example for me when I was learning this craft was when I was a product manager at Monster, the job board. And you quickly realize when you go out and talk to your customer that your competition isn't other job boards, because in the early 90s, most people hadn't actually moved over to job boards. Your competition was the local newspaper. So think about how your customer is actually solving that problem today. If you're in SaaS, your competition's probably Excel or maybe Google Spreadsheets, because you can do so much in there with reporting and data and tools before you even need to pay for another service. If you're in e-scooters, your competition's walking. It's not other e-scooters. So how is your customer solving that problem today? And is your solution really 10 times better? Be honest, because otherwise people are not going to switch over. Number 8, and this gets into how to build great teams, which is a whole other talk, but stop telling your team what to do. And if you won't listen to me, at least listen to Steve Jobs, who said it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and then tell them what to do. You hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do. If you want to be a bit more militaristic about it, you can always listen to the famous World War II General George Patton, who said that if you tell people where to go, but not how to get there, you will be amazed at the results. Because fundamentally, your team is closer to the customer than you are. They have more information than you do, and they have the skills to execute. So why are you telling them what to do? You have to build that culture where the whole team can work together, and you give them that vision, you give them that strategy, and you let them figure out how to execute to get there. And finally, or not finally, number 9, I got confused by my own 10s here. Number 9, 10x people don't exist, but 10x teams do. Again, so often in startup land, it can be so tempting to go find that 10x engineer, that 10x designer, and realistically, they don't exist, and they can cause other problems, or they can be more expensive than you need them to be even to find them. What really matters here is building that team. Again, there's so much data and there's so much evidence showing this. Diverse teams are better at solving problems. We just see this repeatedly in any kind of research looking at it. McKinsey, even McKinsey gets it at this point. Diverse companies are 35% more likely to outperform their peers. Or if you're a sports fan, the world's most successful sports franchise is the New Zealand All Blacks. And they have one simple rule: no assholes. So when you're thinking about building your team, hire smart people, but make sure that they play nicely together. And look for diversity of opinion, experience, and background. Look for those people who will challenge you, who think differently than you do, who have different experiences, who have different backgrounds, because that's how you're going to bring together an amazing team that can really build a 10x product. And last, but certainly not least, the future is not predictable. That business plan is a fiction for a reason, because you don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. You don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. And as the Agile Manifesto says, we value responding to change over following a plan. It's so important to have the right direction, but then be flexible on how you're going to execute. As Tom Chi, who's the lead designer at Google X, invented Google Glasses and many more things at Google, said, don't fail fast, learn fast. So figure out how to make your team ensure that they're always learning. Make learning an objective and celebrate that more than failure. At Mind the Product, we have a team value that is, if we're not winning, we're learning. Failure's fine as long as you learn something from it, but it's only fine if you actually learn something from it. And be prepared to throw everything out the window if you learn new information. That business plan is a work of fiction, so throw it out when you know what's actually going to work. So to sum that up, your idea is worthless, but execution is everything. Share your mission internally and externally as often as you can. Don't mistake vision for strategy. Don't mistake KPIs for outcomes, whether they're business outcomes or customer outcomes. Remember that you are not your customer, even if you started out as exactly the person that you were building for. So make sure that you do listen to real customers and real users. Not every customer is worth it. Be prepared to fire them and look for other alternatives and focus in on where it is you're actually adding value. Your competition is not who you think it is. So make sure that you are building something that's actually better. Stop telling your team what to do. Trust them to build the right thing if you give them the right direction and the right strategic view. 10x people don't exist, but 10x teams do. So think about how everyone in your team brings different perspectives together, and think about value, culture add, not culture fit. And finally, the future is simply not predictable. So make sure that your team is set up to learn fast, to adapt to market changes, to adapt to new trends, to adapt to new information that's coming from your customers. Thank you for that. You can follow me on BFG Martin. You can get the book at productleadership.com. And obviously you can find out more about everything that we do at EQT Ventures and how we support our portfolio companies at EQTVentures.com.
Oh, thank you, Martin. That was great. I've read your book, by the way.
So you're the one.
I'm your only reader, your only fan. I didn't get a signed one though. I think that's kind of crappy. Let's unpack this a bit and all the things you were discussing. Let's start with team. How do you get going? I mean, if you're a founder, you might have led product so far yourself, and now you're taking the step to build something that is slightly more self-playing, so you can focus on other things. What would your tips be to a founder in that position?
Yeah, I mean that's so often the case in product, right? One of the founders is the first and probably only product manager and dealing with all of those challenges. And that's fine for the first couple of years, and until you get to an engineering team of over 5 engineers, it's probably fine because you can keep up with that workload on top of everything else that you have to do. But as soon as you get scale beyond that point, and this might be somewhere in your seed investment journey, might be as you get to your A round, you need to think about scaling that team, and that's when it just becomes too much work to do for the founder to keep hold of it, and that's when it's time to bring in someone who has real experience. And I think one of the classic mistakes that we see, again, could be number 11 on that sheet, is really that people bring in someone too senior too quickly, right? So you might think immediately like, oh, I need a VP product. Let's go hire someone who's already been a VP product. And ideally they've been at Google, or they've been at Facebook, or they've been at Amazon, right? And that sounds great on paper, but there's 2 things to bear in mind. One is at that point, and like I'm a great example of this, I am not the right person to hire at that point because I've kind of forgotten how to do day-to-day product. I'm all about building teams and all about coaching teams at this point. And so I'm not the right product person to hire. But also the same with big companies, right? Someone who's been doing it at big companies is not going to remember how to do it at a startup where maybe you have no customers, or you have 10 customers or 100 customers. It's not the same as building something at Google where you have millions and you can literally do an A/B test on which shade of blue your links should be, right? It's a very different kind of product management. So absolutely think about hiring someone who can professionalize your product function, hire someone who can take over the day-to-day work from you, that you can share that work with, so that you keep a handle on the vision and the strategy, but really that you have someone who can help on the execution piece and who can hopefully then grow into a leader of other product people. But initially it's more about execution than that.
I think that last point is interesting. So how much am I as a founder allowed to be involved in product? How much freedom should I give to the new head of product or my product team?
I think you absolutely, as a founder, have to be involved, right? Like you had an initial idea, you have a vision, you had some insight that led you to where you are today. And especially if you're on the journey already, if you're at the seed or A round, you've gotten somewhere with that insight. So it's not about letting go completely. It's about figuring out what's the right level of handoff, so that the day-to-day execution of how exactly we're going to build this thing, is it, a button or a link, is it blue or green? Like that's not the level of detail you want to be caring about. You don't want to be in the day-to-day conversations with engineering about how to build it. You don't want to be in the day-to-day conversations of testing things. So it's finding the right cadence of kind of letting go of the execution piece, but still definitely being involved in the strategy and the vision piece. And that's, the classic answer in product is always, it depends. So it's hard to give a very clear, line there. It's going to be a conversation, and it's going to depend on who you hire in that team. If you're B2B and enterprise versus B2C, like it's going to depend a little bit, but ideally you are still responsible for vision and strategy. You work together with the product person that you hire on the product strategy and what the roadmap looks like, and then they kind of take over on the day-to-day execution. And that doesn't mean you're not allowed to kind of get involved or have a viewpoint or an opinion, but it's just also recognizing that you have other things to do now, especially if you're the CEO and the founder. You're building a whole organization, right? You're building out an operations function. You're building out and hiring people all over the place. You're out representing the company. Like, you don't have time to do product anymore.
And when is the time to take the step of hiring someone? And when you do, should you be looking for someone with a sort of a design background, a business background, a tech background, or maybe a domain expertise background, depending on what problem you're solving? How would you go about that?
So I think when is basically as soon as you can afford to, right? But I think absolutely by the time that you have, hiring more than 3 or 4 or 5 engineers, you need somebody, because they need someone to work with every day, all the day, to figure out what to build next, what it should look like, have those compromise conversations. So that's kind of the timing, but the earlier the better, because it just frees you up to do bigger, more strategic things. In terms of skill set, again, it's that classic answer of it depends, because it depends on what you have as your own background and what you already have in the team, right? If you're a very strong design founder, Ted, you don't need a design product manager, right? You need someone with a technical background or someone with a business background that complements you and your skill set. So it really does depend on what you already have in the team. I am possibly somewhat famous in the product world for having drawn product as that Venn diagram of business, technology, and design. And that most great product people come from one of those backgrounds. And really it's them figuring out, well, we have a great designer on the team already. One of the founders is really technical. Well, let's make sure that we bring in someone with a business background who can be a complement to that, and make sure that we're thinking about the business model, and we're making sure that, we're thinking about the unit economics and all those things. Or the other way around, like maybe you have a strong MBA founder, then you need someone with a strong design background to make sure that you're designing for the customer.
Let's talk a bit about the team. I think your point number 9 there was about that 10x people don't exist, but 10x teams do. And you used Apple as an example in your presentation. I think they're extremely interesting. There's this famous anecdote about Steve Jobs when being involved in the design of the Pixar building. He and also the old Apple campus. He I think it was in the Pixar building. He put the restrooms so far away in the original designs, so people would have to walk into other departments, and then these random encounters would happen that facilitate innovation. There's another quote that I know that you're a fan of, Martin, from Jonathan Ive, the ex-head of design. He's talking about that one of the things that he's the most absurdly excited about is to have industrial designers sitting next to font designers, sound designers, motion graphic experts, color designers, materials experts, so forth. So the question is, how the heck do you achieve that in COVID times when a lot of companies are going remote? How do you keep creativity flowing? How do you keep those encounters at pace?
I think Apple's such a great example, right? Because we have this mythology of Apple, and we have, Steve Jobs and then Johnny Ives as like these amazing individual designers, and there's almost a mythos of them being the only people who designed anything, right? But then you look at the whole team and you look at actually what they say, as you said, those quotes, right, are directly from them about how they set up their teams. And yes, they're involved in design decisions and they're involved in the process, but it's about bringing all those people around them together, and then designing their building, to your point, right, around those interconnections. And the new Apple campus was built specifically with this in mind, so that you could have everyone in one space, that you can have all these individual, amazing crafts sitting around at the same table. And I think you can absolutely do that remotely. But I think the real lesson to learn for us is thinking about how we set up our teams, right? Because remote working culture is still going to be around your team. And if you have, an old school world where you have like a design function and they sit in one office, and then you have an engineering team and sit in one office, and then product management sit in a different office. That's where we were, right? Like 20 years ago when I started at this kind of stuff, and product would write these like giant product definition documents, throw it over the wall to design would add some like mock-ups to that. You'd throw it over the wall to engineering, and like 6 months later, you got something completely different out the door at the other end of the factory, right? If you build it that way, that's how remote's going to work as well. But if you build it as a proper cross-functional team where design, product, and engineering are equal partners and own that outcome together, then remote or in-person doesn't matter as much, because they're going to make the time to have those conversations, talk about those trade-offs, co-create those designs and mock-ups and stories, however you're working, so that you can build the same thing together.
I think that makes sense. One of my favorite examples, not from the startup world, but from the wider creative world, is Dentsu, the largest advertising agency out in Japan. They used to have one skyscraper for creative people and one skyscraper for product management, which obviously maybe was not the best way to think about it.
And there's so many examples of this. I met at one point someone who did user research, right? And I'm passionate about that as well. So I got super excited to talk to them, and they worked for like a Fortune 100 company in the US. And they're like, oh yeah, I work for the user research and insight division. And I'm like, wait a minute. On the one hand, that sounds amazing, right? Because you have a whole division, right? There's probably 1,000 people who just do user research. But then imagine also like the bureaucracy of that company, a product manager, a designer, anyone in that company being like, well, I need to go do some user research. How do I get in touch with that division? I have to go talk to my boss. My boss has to talk to their boss. We have to like file a request. You have to do a business plan, write a business plan in order to get the research you need to do it. But like, it's ridiculous, right? It just doesn't work. You have to have this embedded in your team.
The word division is a pretty cool word. And by the way, when talking about random encounters, we have to plug our amazing portfolio company out of Berlin called Wonder, creating a remote collaboration tool, like kind of like a Zoom, but facilitating these random encounters and so forth.
We just did a seed investment in KiteMaker, right? Which is rethinking how product teams and development teams work together to co-create what it is that they're going to build, right? Instead of using Jira tickets, building it all in one place.
We did, and since this seems to have evolved into Plugfest, we also have a company called Super Normal, bringing sort of video messages into the development environment. Really, really cool. We're running out of time. We got to wrap up. I had one last thing. If you had to pick one of your 10 tips on what product managers or founders do wrong in product, which one would that be? But before that, I'll pick mine. So you only have 9 to choose from. And my favorite one is number 8, stop telling your team what to do. Trust them. I've seen this go wrong so many times, and especially when the founder can't let go. So I think that's something you have to really think about and reiterate towards yourself over and over again. Yeah. So which of the other 9 is your favorite one?
I do love that one too, and I think it's about building trust with your team. So it's not letting go completely, but it's building trust. But the one I would pick, if I had to pick one, is really number 10, which is the future is unpredictable. So build a team and an organization that's focused on learning, not on shipping. Beautiful.
So with that, big thank you for having us. We at EQT Ventures are thrilled to be associated with TechChill. Would love to go live next year or whenever that happens. And feel free to reach out to us. My email address is ted@eqtventures.com, and Martin's is martin@eqtventures.com. And it also had his BGF Martin at Twitter to follow. Mine is just my name, Ted Persson. So big thanks.
Thanks, everyone. See you in person next year, hopefully.